earthwepzforealz.
Okay, so this is a little video update on my earthwepzforealz mod, which we'll just be calling earthwepz for the moment, since, well, fuck saying that entire tongue twister of a name.
But Shiv, then why did you name it so long and stupid?
Shut up! Anyway, I usually don't do things like this, but I wanted to show this off a little bit because it's actually pretty interesting, and there's a lot of work and maths going behind the scenes to make these weapons as realistic to their real-life counterparts as possible, other than just, oh, cool-looking weapons, pew-pew, explosions.
But Shiv, why are you wasting your time making a video for a mod for a game that like maybe 50 people still play?
'Cause I feel like it! Actually, I'll take a quick moment to answer that seriously. I'm sure a few people wonder why I still play Unreal, and more importantly, still make mods and maps for this game, instead of moving to like Unreal Engine 4. Truth is, this is my favorite game of all time, and I love this game to death. It's still a ton of fun to me every day, and if I can make a mod that people will play, even if just a few people, that keeps this game alive just a little bit longer, then that makes me happy. Plus, I love doing this kind of stuff. But enough sentimental talk. Explosions! Alright, so I figured I'd start by showing some of the fancy visual effects we got going on before diving into the complicated maths part and hurting everyone's brain. So the first thing I wanted to do and felt was important was to have different bullet hit effects based on the surface or texture you were firing upon. This might not seem like a big deal since most other games already do this sort of thing, but for Unreal, normally it's the same boring little smoke puff and sparks for any surface you fire on, and that's just the way it's been. However, thanks to the 227 community patch, we can use a surface trace to get the name of the texture we're firing upon and spawn our separate effects accordingly. And the way it works is simple. The surface trace simply looks for texture names that have words in them like dirt, grass, metal, wood, etc. To further this search, it also looks for the detailed texture of a texture if it can't find one of the names in the main texture name, as a lot of textures will have detailed textures like metal, wood, and so on. This also means it should work for most custom textures as well. So as I'll show off here, we shoot some dirt and we get some dark dust and bits of clumps flying up. Then I shoot some rocks and we get some lighter gray smoke with bits of chipped rock flying. The other two effects I have currently in the game are wood hits and metal hits, and I plan to add more still. This also gives me the opportunity to create decals based on surfaces now as well, not to mention hit sound effects which I haven't made yet. So shooting the dirt leaves dirt-like patches or grooves, while shooting wood leaves splintered wood holes. The current textures for rocks and metal, though, are a little broken, as they're supposed to be alpha blend instead of modulated, but that causes a lighting bug right now, which is being updated for 227 currently. Thank you, I can't say your name. So I'll work on that later. Right, now the next thing I'll show off is the current weapon base Bleeder and I have going. We have two weapons in the game currently, but they're both subclassed from the same base code, making it easier to add new weapons when we want. The two weapons we got are the famous F1 assault rifle and the 5.7 pistol. So the basics of every weapon is currently defined by the following: accuracy, recoil, fire rate, and damage. These four primary traits will be what mainly defines the differences between each weapon. Later on, we hope to incorporate projectile speed as one of these primary traits, but we're not there yet. Adding to these weapon traits, every weapon will also have their own iron sights, clip sizes, ammunition types, fire modes, and of course fancy shell cases. Though most of these are mainly for aesthetics and won't really change how the weapon works compared to the primary traits. Let's look at accuracy first. Now, normal Unreal accuracy actually works differently. If we look at the minigun's secondary fire, we see bullet spread. However, this bullet spread works in a weird way, offsetting the X and Y axis, which ends up creating this weird kind of square pattern. Our spread, however, is a bit more dynamic and actually spreads out in a circular pattern, while, as you can see, most shots are in the center with less shots as it spreads out. Calculating each weapon's accuracy is a bit difficult. Considering IRL, there's so many factors to take into account, it's not always down to some simplified number. But what I can do, and what I am doing, is looking at each weapon's effective firing range and establishing my base accuracy on this. Now, the definition of a weapon's effective firing range is technically the furthest distance an effective shot can be taken with reasonable certainty that it will hit. So that actually works for our accuracy in game. I'm also going to have to assume that by target, they mean a human-sized target, since target size would obviously have to be taken into consideration. What I've done here is built a little firing range test map with relatively human-sized targets, just a bit bigger, in order to make sure each weapon's accuracy is correct. The first target here is exactly 100 feet away, with each next target being another 100 feet. This was the easy part to calculate, as we know from the Unreal Wiki, 16 Unreal units in-game is equal to 1 foot. So if we're looking for 100 feet in the game, we multiply 100 by 16, giving us 1600 Unreal units. These targets are exactly 1600 units from where you stand in the cubicle here, with every next target being an additional 1600 Unreal units. So now let's look at the 5.7 for example. According to the wiki, the 5.7 has an effective firing range of 50 meters. 50 meters equals about 164 feet, so with that knowledge in mind, this first target being 100 feet away, I should be able to land every single shot on the target. For this test, I have also disabled recoil, which would affect my accuracy. "10 shots, 10 hits. Perfect. Moving to the next target, however, being 200 feet away, we should start to see some bullets missing their mark now. Not an absurd amount, but probably around 3 to 5 bullets every 10 or so shots fired should miss this target. "10 shots and only 6 hitting their mark. Let's look at something like the FAMAS though. Now this has a much greater effective firing range, being 300 meters for the F1 model, which is the model we have in the game. 300 meters equals about 984 feet. The longest target range I have currently set up is only at 800 feet, so it looks like I'll have to make some more targets. But I'll disable recoil and empty a clip into this 800 foot target, which should have a considerable spread, but no bullet should completely miss. Looking good. Anyway, moving on, let's look at recoil and damage, since they sort of have to do with each other. I'm going to try to base recoil as much as I can to each weapon's real-life counterpart, even though there really isn't a measurement for recoil, since it all depends on each person, how strong they are, how well trained with a weapon they are, how they hold the weapon in the first place, etc. But what I can do is at least establish a linear recoil between all weapons based on the weapon's power and possibly its weight, which would also have an effect on recoil. I've even been watching some videos online of the weapons in question being fired to more accurately try and recreate their recoil in-game. I'll also point out that a recoil system will also affect your y-axis and not just your z-axis, making it a bit more realistic. So for calculating the power of a weapon to determine recoil, we want to look at how fast the bullets fire from the weapon and also the size of the bullet, which is actually how the damage was also calculated. Now, we haven't actually calculated the recoil yet, so I'm just going to have to move on to how damage works. Since Unreal, or most games actually, have a very linear damage system, I had to make do with what I could. We created a base damage for each weapon that goes something like this. Bullet size plus bullet speed divided by 50. Yes, I realize this is some bullshit equation I just pulled out of my arse, but the point is, this way we have linear damage scaling between all weapons that makes them scaled relatively to each other and their real-life counterparts. So the FAMAS uses 5.56 by 45mm bullets with a muzzle velocity of 3,100 feet per second. 5.56 times 45 equals 250.2 plus 3,100 equals 3,350.2. Divide that by 50 and we get 67.004, which we just round to 67, and there we have it. Each bullet fired from the FAMAS will do 67 points of damage, keeping in mind of course that a human's health in Unreal is 100. Now that's just the base. Using 227 game rules, we were also able to make a simple variable damage scaling based on where you shot an enemy. Since pawns in Unreal use simple cylinder collision, the only thing we could do was make it so that shooting the center area of the cylinder would do the normal 67 or about 67 damage, considering this is probably where most vital organs will be. The leg area and below will do less damage, scaled between 0.9 and 0.5 times less than 67, so roughly anything from 34 to 60 damage, while the neck and head area of course would do considerably more damage, 3 to 4 times more. So you're looking at headshots with a FAMAS doing up to about 268 damage. Now then, my favorite part, the fire rates. This was one of the hardest things to calculate, but it was a lot of fun and very rewarding in the end. The FAMAS F1 has a fire rate of between 900 and 1,000 rounds per minute. That's approximately 16 bullets a second, specifically 15 to 16.6 bullets per second. I wanted to make sure we got this perfectly. I even sat here with a timer and everything to make sure I was getting this right. Of course, later, Bleeder used some fancy Uscript magics and hacks to allow me to simply punch in the rounds per minute into the default properties, accurately mimicking bullets per second. But that's besides the point. However, this is the point. The FAMAS F1, hosting a 25-round clip, should end up with 10 to 9 bullets left in the clip after firing for 1 second. There you have it. Perfect. However, the Unreal Engine has certain limitations that could be an issue. You can't fire faster than your frames per second, or FPS. Now that's normally 60 for most people, meaning 60 bullets a second. Remember, the FAMAS is 16 bullets a second, so you think we wouldn't have a problem. However, there are other weapons that can fire faster, and even in an old game such as this, especially with 227's new emitter effects, you might not always be hitting your precious 60 FPS. The slow-mo command that speeds up or slows down time could also affect this in negative ways. So Bleeder, once again, came up with some more code hacks, which basically will compensate for frame loss by firing more than one bullet at a time to make up for bullets not fired due to frame loss. Brilliant! Now I can do this! Looking at some more visuals, we see shell casings for every bullet fired, even if they're currently the wrong type of shell casing for this weapon. Working on importing more models for each bullet type. Ammunition will also be accurately based on a weapon's IRL, ammo type, and clip size. For example, we have the FAMAS, which uses 5.56 by 45mm ammunition with a clip capacity of 25. So you'll have 25 rounds per clip as seen here, and picking up any 5.56 by 45mm ammo will be shared with any other weapon that uses the same ammo type. We also have iron sights already working for every weapon, which will actually offset where the bullet is fired from. So as you see here, firing hip fire with the weapon on our right, we can see the bullet tracer slightly to our right, but in iron sights we can't see the tracer at all as it's directly in front of us. Note the bullet tracer is too big here and only for show at the moment. Also notice that using iron sights barely changes your field of view, or FOV, only subtracting 5 from whatever your normal FOV is. I did this to make iron sights have a noticeable change, as if you're slightly moving your head forward a bit and focusing, but nothing ridiculous like most games where you're suddenly getting eagle eyes for looking down the sights of your weapons. Always hated that. Anyway, in the future, switching to iron sights will be smoother instead of this instant transition that you see now. Last but not least, we come to fire modes, of which we currently have automatic, semi, and burst fire, even though we don't yet have burst fire weapons in the mod. Automatic is self-explanatory, while the semi-fire is a little different. For things like pistols, I wanted to let people fire basically as fast as they could click their mouse button, but at the same time, limit the fire rate to a realistic amount, to avoid things like the infamous Call of Duty's scroll wheel firing. So there is a fire rate limit set in place that doesn't allow you to fire too quickly, but still at a realistic speed as to how fast you could actually pull the trigger each time. So that's it. Now, I didn't mention Bleeder91 very much, but without him, this mod wouldn't be happening right now. I may have the ideas and can do the visual effects and decals, but Bleeder91 is pretty much doing most of the coding behind this and making this possible, so a big thanks to him. Thanks for watching.